margin. Jesus and the margins. And the two parts of this, there are so many stories. Jesus sought people that other people avoided. We've talked about that. We've talked about that before, where he moved toward hurting or marginalized people rather than keeping his distance so that he looked holy, which was kind of how we often do, and after those who are especially clergy, or especially those who are kind of spiritual, known, popular, famous Christians, we don't want to sully ourselves with people who are on the margins. Maybe we might donate, or we might say you should, but I got to make sure I don't get dirty. But Jesus reached out to those who were marginalized by society. Even just the miracles that he did so often were to people who were desperate, were on the margins, that society had shoved to the margins. And he loved them, and he cared for them, and he gave them actual compassion. To increase the font, he healed the blind, so that's... Jesus loved the outcast. And that it was expressed by real, genuine, tangible care, not just in fixing their problem, but by offering deep love and compassion. And we're going to continue to talk about that today. And this is a sermon full of caveats and tangents, opposed to normal sermons, maybe. This is basically a tangent that has some tangents attached to it. But practically, I want us to talk like we started last week. Each time we talk about this topic, that there are actions, attitudes, and advocacy that we need to have. The people we're talking about today who are on the margins are not because they deserve to be on the margins or intrinsically they have problems. It's because society pushes them to the margins. And you'll see what I'm talking about. The first one I want to talk about is children. Children. Jesus reached out to children. And when Chuck told me that Freya might be coming today, I'm like, this works so perfect. Because Jesus welcomed children. Right? Matthew 9, 13 to 15. One day some parents or grandparents brought their children to Jesus so he could lay his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples scolded the parents for bothering him. But Jesus says, let the children come to me. Don't stop them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to those who are like these children. And he placed his hands on their heads and he blessed them before he left. I got to admit, is there anything greater than putting your hand on a baby's head? Why is that so fun? There you go. Thank you, Chuck. If any of you need any demonstration, now you can be distracted just during this first point about children, where Freya is a illustration. But even little Benny, mine is little Fontenelle, but you just want to just touch his little softball side head. So amazing. Kids, though, are amazing, right? They are loud, needy, sticky. They ask too many questions. They don't listen. They are unpredictable. They're whiny. They don't sit still. They don't listen. They cry. They distract and are distracting. That was in my list already before you showed up. Because I was thinking of Calvin was saying he's so excited to come. He wants to do music sometime in the next couple of months and bring Benny. I'm like, well, I might as well not even show up that Sunday, because not only will you be distracted, I'll be distracted. They don't know anything. They laugh at goofy stuff. They like knock-knock jokes. Oh, my word, the knock-knock joke era for each of our kids was debilitating. Getting asked every day what your favorite color is. Ugh. They pick things, they stink, they're unfiltered. You take them to the grocery store and they're like, look at that fat guy, right out loud. And they are vulnerable, and they're unable to defend themselves physically, intellectually, emotionally. They are trusting and naive. They're easily frightened and intimidated, and they are small, and they have no money, and they have no authority, and they have no power. And Jesus adored them. Jesus' disciples saw children as a nuisance. And Jesus said, no, they're the inhabitants of the kingdom. They're the example of what people who are truly in the kingdom are like. The vulnerable, the weak, the powerless. They need the kingdom. We're all children of God. We are most vulnerable. We are without dignity often. I used to say, there's nothing less dignified than a toddler. Because any adult can come by and go, lift him up and go, sniff him. Right? There's no dignity. You know what a toddler does? All right. We must protect them because they are so weak. From those most likely to experience abuse and be used as a political pawn or to be victimized, the church must protect children. Not just toddlers, but children and teenagers and young adults even. They must be loved and nurtured. They must be taught because the kingdom is theirs, not ours. The kingdom of God is mostly for those who are not invited into the circles of power, who have nothing to offer. And we must find comfort for those who cannot find comfort in the earthly kingdom. The God's kingdom on earth is for them. And we get to be the soldiers who protect them. In short, they must be blessed. We must bless the children, never use them. Rant number 1. We hear often, what about the children? Who's protecting the children? We must fight for the children. It has become a joke. It has become a political pawn, a political statement, and an excuse to push through whatever agenda. All sides of the argument. With very little tangible care and compassion for actual children. We're to care for the children both here, close to home, and abroad. We need to care for and show compassion for starving children, wherever they are, who are held up and we are holding up aid for whatever economic system that is keeping them starving and poor and in squalor and sick. We argue about whether they deserve food and medicine and child care. We debate whether we should give school lunch to kids. When it is within our ability to help generously, and when we refuse that to keep comfortable and powerful and secure, and to only help our own, we are violating the most basic instructions from Jesus, to bless the children. To withhold blessing is a sin. You know me, I don't throw that word around often. We must never, not only must we bless children, we must never cover up, rationalize, or accept the abuse of the most vulnerable, abuse of children in any form. I've told our board this, probably told you. If there is ever abuse or a suspicion of that, especially when we had children's programs, we do not do a self-investigation. We immediately report. We get others involved, and we do not accept it. We do not cover it up. We do not explain it away. And sadly, the church no longer seems like an automatically safe place for children. We must always fight to bless the children, never to victimize. So what are some specific actions we can do? If our actions, attitudes, and advocacy actions, we must welcome those who are vulnerable. But more than being welcoming, and again, I'm talking here not only actual children, especially actual children, but also all of those who Jesus said the kingdom belongs to those who are like them, those who are vulnerable. We need to welcome, but more than that, I think we need to invite. The word welcoming is thrown around a lot in churches. And not just churches, in community groups and in anything, where we say all are welcome, but when they show up, they're not really welcome. You're welcome as long as you're willing to kind of conform and change and fix and be better, more like us. Assimilate. We don't want to be just welcoming. We want to invite. We want to seek out the vulnerable and say, come with us, you're safe here. Right where you're at. We also, what's an action we can do? There's a negative action. Never be a gatekeeper. Never decide who gets to be blessed by Jesus. Let's not be the disciples in this case. Deciding, oh, you know what, you're just too much of a nuisance. Jesus wouldn't want to bless you. Right? Never be gatekeepers. We don't get to decide who wants to be around Jesus. And then find ways to bless kids generously in more than word. Sometimes that's child care. Sometimes that's stuff and money and food. Sometimes that's helping out, giving parents a break. We're learning about that. A tangible thing, going to let a mom take a nap. What an amazing gift. Taking a teenager for coffee or something like that. Right? Listening, how about this? Actually listening without giving advice to a teenager. Just listening to what they have to say. Without correcting them. You don't know nothing. Right? Attitude. Some attitudes we can work on. Realize that those who are vulnerable and weak are not a burden or a nuisance. They are our purpose. And they are our focus. We're not trying to get over it. We're not trying to fix them quickly so that they are easier to deal with. That should be who we seek. That is who we look to focus on. They are the inheritance of the kingdom of heaven. Remember, we're left here on earth to serve the vulnerable. We're going to start passing Freya around. If she gets too much, we're taking turns. Kids are that old song. Kids are our future. You know, I believe the children are our future. One of the most memorable but kind of obvious lyrics in any. Well, of course, they're the future. They're not our past, right? I believe the children are our future, but we have a duty to leave the world better for them. That should be our attitude. What are we doing to make life better for the children as they grow? And advocacy. We need to call off the gatekeepers and those who would run off the vulnerable. You know what? For every time that someone says, no, you're too much trouble, we need to stand right there and say, no, come on in. Come on in. We need to speak out and support true justice. Like we talked about last week, true justice is not just fairness. It is destroying and working against systems that keep people oppressed. Systems that hurt the vulnerable, that help the powerful and hurt the vulnerable. We need to speak out, be advocates for true justice. And we need to work for protecting kids from bad actors, starting with those in our camp. We need to be willing to call out our own who have violated that, whether the most heinous abuse we can imagine or just being dismissive or refusing to bless the vulnerable. The second marginalized group that Jesus reached out to and cared for was women. Women in that culture were placed in the secondary status, and Jesus refused to play that game. Jesus was not part of the patriarchy. Luke 8:43-48. A woman in the crowd had been suffering for 12 years with constant bleeding, and she could find no cure. And coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe, and immediately the bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked, and everyone denied it. And Peter said, Master, there's a whole crowd. They're pressing up against you. But Jesus said, someone deliberately touched me, for I felt the healing power go out of me. And when this woman realized that she could not stay hidden, she began to tremble and fell on her knees in front of him. And the whole crowd heard her and explained that she had touched him and she had been immediately healed. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has made you well. I wasn't sure where to put this story because I love it, and I wasn't sure whether to talk about this in the idea of Jesus healing the sick, but I think this is so powerful here. This is a time and place where Jesus walked. It was unusual for men to have, outside of the family, to address a woman in any way. But Jesus did things differently. When he healed her, he called her daughter. This woman who took a bold risk, who reached out, who was afraid from being caught, not just, I think, by Jesus, the miracle, but because of a man, a powerful man, a rabbi, confronting her, expecting to be put in her place, instead was met with endearment. He addressed not only her pain and her illness and her suffering, but but also her place in society, and said, you don't need to accept that. You're my daughter. And he did this all over. The Samaritan woman at the well. There's a woman at the well who had this history, and we've talked about this. There's all sorts of stories. Why is she there in the middle of the day? She's a woman sitting there at the well, and no one's around, and she's obviously kind of shunned. And Jesus sidles up and sits down and chats with her about deep, important things. A public conversation with a woman about important spiritual truth. And he knew she could grasp it, and she could share it, and she could understand it, and she needed it. So he sat there and he shared with her. He crossed ethnic lines, yes, we'll talk about that later, the Samaritan, but also gender lines. He embraced that conversation. The woman caught in adultery. Man, they had her dead to rights. And the crowd was gleefully, joyfully dragging her through the streets and publicly shaming her to the point of they want to kill her. And they were also doing it to make Jesus look bad. Expecting him to, man, we caught him now because he can't stand up for a woman. And she's evil. Not only is she a woman, but she's a woman who did something bad. They expected Jesus to judge her, and instead he saw her heart. And he said, why are you treating her like this? You without sin cast the first stone. And when they all realize we're gone, when they wander off, and she's left there in her pain and shame and sin and weak place, Jesus says, it's okay. You know what, just go and don't live like this anymore. He forgave her. He stood up for her. He defended her to those, even though she was dead to rights. He gave her dignity as a person. His best friends were Mary and Martha. They were co-laborers. They were the first to share the good news of his return, and he gave them important work to do. How do we mimic this? What actions can we take? Regardless of politics and culture, we must see all people as deserving of dignity and the same treatment. All people. And let's quit using misunderstood verses about a certain time and place to find ways to make sure that we men know better and we can stay on top and you can do your little thing, women. I refuse that. I reject that, and we will not be a safe place for that. Women are important. You are the backbone of this church, I can tell you that. Paul reinforces that in Galatians 3, right? There's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave or free, male or female. We're all the same to God. Paul reminds us of how Jesus saw people. So our action is to refuse to deny opportunity to women just because they're women. Let's lift up women in leadership. Let's treat each other the same. Let's listen. Let's talk. Let's learn. I remember one of the great tragedies I heard was in Christian publishing when Deb was writing her book. And we heard from somebody who were like, we need to put Dave's name on it too, because men won't read Christian books written by women. I didn't write that book. I'm not that bright. I got to be a part of it. Deb interviewed me for hours and then took what my rambling sermons type stuff and turned it into prose that made sense. But how tragic that we refuse to learn from women. What's the attitude? We must rework the damage made by weird misunderstanding of those passages that we've extrapolated to cover all time and place and culture to silence women and maintain male power. We need to change our attitude. Give respect and dignity and response to women. And stop looking for excuses to keep undue inequity and lack of true justice. Advocacy, what do? We stand up against those who look to silence or demean or pigeonhole women, and we speak out in support of true justice. And we must never cover up, rationalize, or accept abuse or oppression of women. Restore will stand on that. The sick. Jesus touched the sick. Mark 1, starting verse 40. A man with leprosy came and he knelt in front of Jesus begging to be healed. If you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean. And he said, and moved by compassion, real compassion, actual compassion, Jesus reached out and he touched him. But listen to what he said. I am willing. Be healed. Oh, my word. And then this is a great story. We don't have time for it today, but he's healed, and he's like, and Jesus is kind of like, don't go tell everyone. And the guy's like, he goes, go to the priest, make sure you're actually clean so you can rejoin society, but don't go telling everybody what happened. And of course, how do you not tell that? And he tells everybody. Lepers were among the most stigmatized people in Jesus' day because their disease came with such horrific consequences, and it was contagious, and the only way they knew to deal with it was total seclusion. Kick them out of society so the rest of us don't get hurt. And this one runs up to Jesus, and I love that. It's like, hey, you can do this. Will you heal me? Probably expecting, because Jesus often just said, be healed. Right? Stand up. Pick up your mat. Right? He didn't have to be there for some of them. Oh, she's risen from the dead. She's fine. But Jesus says, oh, not only am I willing to heal you, I'm going to connect with you. I'm going to literally reach out to you. We talk about outreach in this kind of ethereal idea, this theoretical idea that we're going to go out and help. That means actually going out and touching some sick people. We want to skip right to the healing, but Jesus didn't do that. What he did is an example to his followers. Here's somebody who's dangerous. Here's somebody who's scary, and I'm going to connect with them. I'm going to move toward them. He offered closeness and compassion together. Hey, not only am I going to heal you, but we're going to be together. Care for the outcasts who have good reason. We need to reach out and touch the lepers in our community and in our life and in our family. Who are the sick and the scary ones that we refuse, that we're scared of, that we don't want to touch? Whether it's the physically ill or disabled. Sometimes it's awkward and they're different and we don't know how to process it. We need to reach out and become close. Addicts. Special place in my heart. It's easy to say it's their own fault so we can write them off, or that's our excuse for keeping distance. What if they use again? Like saying to someone who has cancer, well, I'm not going to really care for you because what if it comes back? Caring for them, being close to them, reaching out even when it's their own fault. Mental illness. We don't understand it. It's confusing. It's scary. Sometimes we don't see it as a real illness. But reaching out and being close to those who are mentally ill. Even more difficult sometimes for us is emotional illness. Even more misunderstood. We act like they can just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Hey, just go for a walk. You're depressed? Go for a walk. You'll be fine. Someone's been in bed for 3 months, and we think, quit drinking soda and go for a hike. Instead of going and offering closeness and patience and listening and being there for the long haul. We act as if that's a weakness of character, or they just want attention, or they're lazy, all those things that we make up just because we don't know how to fix it. But here's what we're called to do is be close. Draw near. Or for me, the hardest one for me often has been the terminal. I've been with some of your family and friends when we knew the end was coming. It's uncomfortable and scary, and it's easy to offer platitudes and no real comfort, but you know what I was told? You know what has been communicated to me in those moments? Just being there. Being close. Being in the room. All of these cases, we need to follow Jesus' example of compassion and closeness. So what do we need to do? We need to actually reach out. I think sometimes physically reach out, but physically be near, offer some closeness, touch, be around, get close, listen, and weep with them. Listen and help when asked. And when they say, this is what I need, don't go, no, what you really need is this. Resist our temptation to know better. Offer little advice, if any. Just show compassion. I would say this, especially in some of these mental and emotional and addiction, support tiny steps. Celebrate tiny steps. Hey, you showered. Congratulations. Without saying, so what are you going to do next? You're all better now? And provide help when we're able. The attitudes, pray for compassion on ourselves that outweighs our own discomfort. Pray that God gives us the ability to reach out that is stronger than our own awkwardness and discomfort. And see need rather than weakness. We sometimes equate those two things. And don't look for blame or cause. Sometimes that's not very helpful. Be right where they are now. How do we become advocates? Stand alongside those who already need support. Speak up in public and proclaim their dignity. Refuse to join any act or policy or behavior that takes away help because they are sick and they're blamed for their own illness. And speak out in support of true justice. We must never cover up, rationalize, or accept continued victimization by diminishing or ignoring the sick. And lastly, others. Sorry, we're going to go a little bit long today. Buckle up. Others. And this isn't just like everybody else. This is the people who, in quote, the others, those who are not in our group. Jesus accepted and embraced Samaritans. Luke 10:33-37. Then, and this is his story, the Good Samaritan, the despised Samaritan came along, and he saw the man. And we know, if you don't know the story, right? He's telling the story. There's a guy who's beaten up, and a priest walks by, and a lawyer walks by, and finally the despised Samaritan comes along. And we saw the man who was beaten up and robbed. He felt compassion for him. And going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. And he put the man on his own donkey, and he took him to an inn where he took care of him. And the next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, saying, take care of this man, and if his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm around. And I'm sorry that I'm here. That's the Dave translation. Now, which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by the bandits? Jesus asked. And the man replied, the one who showed him mercy. Then Jesus said, now go and do the same. This comes as another gotcha moment by the religious leaders to Jesus. Jesus had just said, the greatest commandment, love God, love people, love your neighbor. And they said, they had a gotcha. Who is my neighbor? Hey, who is to decide who's my neighbor? That's where they get to be the gatekeepers of who gets help, who they've got to help. And Jesus tells the story. And I love that they hate the Samaritan so much, he couldn't answer the question, the Samaritan. Right? Jesus says, who was the real neighbor? And he couldn't just say, the Samaritan was. He had to say, you know, the guy who helped him. Couldn't even say the word. I love this. Jesus chooses this unlikely hero. You know what the funny thing about most of the times we tell church stories about ourselves or our church or our belief or our team? We're the heroes. And often we're the villains. Or worse, I think sometimes more often probably than the villain, we're just bystanders. We're just bystanders. We're extras in the story, not paying attention. Who's our Samaritan? Who's the Samaritan who is the one who we really don't want to help, who we really don't want to give credit to? A Blue Jays fan? An Iraqi? A socialist? A Muslim? An LGBT plus person? An illegal immigrant? A Democrat? A Republican? An atheist? Someone from that church? And Jesus wasn't involved just with theoretical Samaritans in stories. He was involved with real ones, right? Samaritan woman, tax collectors, Levites. He honored Gentiles, the Roman centurion, right? Jesus he didn't just care about Jews. He didn't just care about his people. He cared about all people, and he showed that. We must love the others. Who's a Samaritan to us? The poor, all that, just the same list. The socialist, the Muslim, the poor, the addicted, the felon, the LGBT, the homeless, the illegal immigrant, black or brown people. Who is it that we're scared of? Who is it that's other to us? That God says you need to have just as much compassion, actual compassion for those. They're not others, they're mine. Real followers of Jesus, and especially the people of Restore Church, there is no other. Only people created by God, bearing his image, and loved as completely as we are. So application, how do we do this? What are the actions? We need to repent of times we have been prejudiced and biased. And then we need to listen to those that we have been prejudiced and biased against. And then we need to seek them out. We need to go and invite and love them and care for them. We need to look for the most obviously downtrodden and targeted people and offer love and protection and care. They're not hard to find. And our attitude needs to be have a perspective that honestly looks at ourselves, both as individuals and corporately, and realize sometimes we're bystanders or we're the villains. And here's the thing, even admitting that I have bias, and there's times I have been biased against others, in that same moment we know, and I am forgiven by God for it. And he will change my attitude. So we fight bias. We don't make excuses when it's pointed out. If you're like me, you're hearing this, and there's part of me that's like, but I'm not like that. Making all sorts of reasons. Advocacy, we need to stand in the way of those who are prejudiced and hateful and treat others as lesser. We need to refuse to support policies or conversations or plans that excuse, diminish, or remove the dignity of others. And then we need to bring others with us as we go into that fight. Let's drag each other along. We're stronger when we're together. Let's stand shoulder to shoulder against that. And speak out in support of true justice. We must never cover up, rationalize, or accept the oppression and relegation to the margins of those who are different than us. We must rewrite the narrative of the powerful, especially in the church, that gives cover to the most clear abusers and oppressors of the weak and the marginalized by pitting one marginalized group against the other and vilifying minorities and obfuscate the abuse and oppression of the powerful. That's a lot. Let me say it clearly. Those who are abusers of all of these people that we've talked about, of all of those in the margins, are most likely to be clergy, educators, law enforcement, politicians, far more than the people they are villainizing because of it. Rather than arguing about who gets to use what bathroom, we need to check ourselves. Check those in power. And don't fall for right now the not all argument, because of course that's true. Yes, not all are bad, but we need to hold accountable those who are powerful and not use it as another bludgeon against a marginalized group. We want to follow the way of Jesus, who called out the powerful and embraced the marginalized. We need to offer compassion and justice. Jesus' actions and teachings demonstrate a concern for those suffering from poverty, illness, neglect. And we need to offer the same compassion in our fight for justice. We need to really love our neighbor, regardless of who they are, where they're from, or what church they go to, or what socioeconomic class they're from. That is a foundational principle. And we need to remember that the last marginalized community, the last group that Jesus cared for was me. Romans 5:8. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. We should never lose sight of the fact that we should be alienated from the love of God, yet Christ showed up and loves us. Restore Church will be a place that literally follows the way of Jesus in a profound and obvious way, as we with love expressed by replacing marginalization with acceptance, and abuse with healing, and oppression with support and elevation. Let me pray. God, thank you that you love us, and that we get the privilege of loving those who you love most, who need it the most, those who are on the margins. Give us courage, give us compassion, and give us resources to do that well. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Luke 6:20 and 21, then Jesus turned to his disciples and said, God blesses you who are poor, for the kingdom of God is yours. God blesses you who are hungry now, for you will be satisfied. God blesses those who weep now, for in due time you'll laugh. May we be people who answer Jesus' call to show deep compassion, seek justice, and care for those on the margins through generosity in action, attitude, and advocacy. And we offer love expressed by replacing marginalization with acceptance, abuse with healing, and oppression with support and elevation, to the glory of God and the flourishing of our neighbors. Thank you so much. I love you guys, and we'll see you next week.